3 years, one curse, and the night I walked away forever. My name is Ella. 3 years ago, I was the future Luna of Moonshadow Pack. Beautiful. Untouchable. The girl every she-wolf wanted to be, and every elder proudly pointed to when they talked about the future of our pack. Then everything changed after my coming-of-age ceremony. A strange silver-black mark appeared across my face. Overnight, I went from moon goddess blessed to moon goddess cursed. People stopped looking at me with admiration. They looked at me with pity. Or disgust. Everyone waited for Kyle Blackwood, the future alpha, to reject me. But he didn't. Not then. Instead, he stood in front of the entire pack, took my hand, and swore before the moon goddess herself that I was his fated mate. No matter what happened to me, no matter what I became, he would never leave. I believed him. God, I believed every word. For that promise, I endured 3 years of whispers, stares, rejection, and loneliness. Until 1 week before Kyle's Alpha Ascension ceremony, he came back with another woman. Sienna. Beautiful. Perfect. The kind of woman people immediately called Moon Goddess favored. Kyle stood beside her with guilt written all over his face. Imsuri, ella. His voice sounded gentle, almost kind. I can't honor our mating bond anymore. The floor nearly disappeared beneath my feet. When I was 18, I was poisoned during the trial hunt. Sienna saved my life. I've spent 3 years searching for her. He reached for Sienna's hand. And now that I've finally found her, I'm going to marry her. My throat closed. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't tell him the truth. Because Kyle didn't know. Sienna had never saved him. 3 years ago, in that forest where he nearly died, I was the one who knelt before the moon goddess and traded away my beauty for his life. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge. If you've ever given everything to someone who threw you away, stay with me. Drop a comment and hit subscribe. Because what happened next will make you want to scream. Chapter 1. The End of a Promise. The moment Kyle announced the dissolution of our moon bond, the air inside the council hall seemed to freeze. For one heartbeat, nobody spoke. Then the elders attacked. Ella's moon corruption has never been cleansed. She is no longer qualified to become Luna. Effective immediately, all future Luna privileges are revoked. And she may no longer reside in the Alpha House as Kyle's mate. Each sentence landed like a blade. Slow. Deliberate. Painfully precise. I stood in the center of the hall with my back perfectly straight, even though my fingers had already gone numb from the cold. Or maybe from heartbreak. Around me, people stared. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked amused. Most looked relieved. As if they had been waiting years for this exact moment. Kyle. The aging Alpha's voice cut through the room. What do you think? Silence fell. I lifted my eyes toward him. For a second, I saw the Kyle I used to know. The boy who used to stand between me and the world. The boy who came back bloody from rogue attacks and grinned anyway. Don't worry, Ella. I've got you. Back then, my moon mark had glowed silver across my skin. Back then, the entire pack adored me. Back then, Kyle loved me. Or at least I thought he did. When wolf venom nearly killed him during the trial hunt, I had dropped to my knees inside the moon temple and begged the goddess for mercy. Take my beauty. Take my blessing. Take my future. Take everything. Just let him live. And she had. The next morning, my face began to change. The mark appeared. The whispers followed. People called me cursed. Abandoned. Damaged. Even low-ranking wolves who once worshipped me suddenly felt comfortable mocking me behind my back. I couldn't defend myself. The moon goddess's bargain came with one condition. I could never reveal the truth. And for a while, Kyle fought for me. He argued with elders. Threw pack members out of meetings for insulting me. Spent countless nights searching for a cure. Every morning he'd sit beside my bed and promise me, "Don't be scared, Ella. I'll fix this." But he never did. Instead, little by little, he drifted away. He stopped taking me to pack gatherings. Stopped inviting me to council meetings. Stopped knocking on my door at night. I kept telling myself he was exhausted. Under pressure. Busy preparing to become alpha. Until today. Until Sienna. Until this. I don't think she should be exiled, Kyle finally spoke. His voice was calm, detached. She's still a member of Moonshadow Pack. That was it. That was all. Not a defense. Not a fight. Not even a goodbye. Just permission for me to stay. Like a stray dog being allowed to remain on pack territory. Murmurs erupted around the room. She never should have kept the Luna position this long. Kyle's already being generous. A woman rejected by the moon goddess should be grateful she's allowed to stay. The words blurred together. Then another voice rose above them. Soft. Sweet. Calculated. Sienna stepped forward. She looked breathtaking in a pale silver dress. Gentle. Graceful. Harmless. The perfect future Luna. She glanced at the elders before turning to Kyle. Ella has been part of this pack for years. Even if the bond is over, she shouldn't be humiliated. She offered me a sympathetic smile. I'd be happy to give her some of the rooms prepared for the new Luna, if it makes things easier for her. Instant approval spread across the room. See? That's a real Luna. So kind. So gracious. I almost laughed. My humiliation had become her public relations campaign. Before I could decline, Kyle spoke first. You can't stay in the Luna wing anymore. His eyes met mine. There was nothing left in them. No worms. No guilt. Nothing. Our engagement is over. You need to move out of the Alpha House. There's an empty cabin on the outer edge of the territory. You can stay there. For a second, my chest hurt so badly I thought I might collapse. Instead I smiled. A tiny smile. One nobody noticed. Okay. Then I walked away. Alone. The cabin. I packed my belongings in silence and followed the dark trail leading toward the abandoned cabin. Dust covered every surface. Cold wind slipped through broken window frames. The fireplace hadn't been used in years. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to feel exhausted. Not angry. Not devastated. Just tired. So unbelievably tired. I curled up in the darkness and rested my forehead against my knees. Time passed. I wasn't sure how much. Then moonlight slipped through the cracked window. Silver light spilled across the floor. And inside that light, someone appeared. A figure made of moonlight. Sacred. Beautiful. Impossible. My breath caught. Moon goddess. The figure looked at me. And smiled. The sacrifice has been fulfilled. My entire body froze. The mark on your face will disappear in 1 week. My heartbeat stopped. You no longer need to keep the secret. What belongs to you will soon be returned. The goddess's voice echoed through the room. Then she was gone. What they really thought. My fingers drifted to the dark mark that had lived on my face for 3 years. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin walls. I tightened my grip around the Luna relic hanging around my neck. The only thing my mother had left me. A sacred heirloom passed down through the women in our bloodline for generations. Years ago, hearing the moon goddess promise the return of my blessing would have made me cry with happiness. Now, I felt almost nothing. Maybe because the girl who once dreamed of becoming Luna had already died. Maybe because Kyle had taken the last piece of her with him. A sudden conversation outside snapped me from my thoughts. The northern packs are getting more aggressive. 2 more patrol wolves came back injured yesterday. Kyle becomes alpha next week. If something goes wrong now, the whole territory is screwed. I froze. Then another voice lowered conspiratorially. Ever since Ella got that mark, nothing's gone right. The border conflicts. The failed hunts. The injured warriors. Tell me that isn't a sign. A bitter laugh followed. The moon goddess abandoned her. Honestly, she should have left years ago. At this point, she'd be more useful as a political bride for Blackrock Pack. The others laughed. I stood in the darkness without making a sound. So that was what they really thought. Not that I'd spent years helping Kyle hold the pack together. Not that I'd stayed awake countless nights organizing reports, calming angry families, and negotiating with elders who wanted him to fail. None of that mattered. All anyone remembered was the mark on my face. Slowly, I loosened my grip on the blanket. There was no point holding on anymore. The mark on her neck. The next morning, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, Sienna stood outside bathed in sunlight. Beautiful. Fresh. Perfect. Exactly the way future Lunas were supposed to look. I wanted to check on you, she said. Her smile was warm enough to fool almost anyone. This cabin is old. I was worried you might be uncomfortable. As she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, my gaze landed on her neck, and everything inside me stopped. A mating mark. Dark. Fresh. Possessive. Unmistakable. Kyle's mark. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what it meant. A mating bond might be spiritual, but a mark? That was personal. Primal. Intimate. Permanent. The moon bond had barely been dissolved, and Kyle had already marked someone else. Sienna noticed where I was staring and quickly adjusted her collar. Oh, she gave a small embarrassed laugh. I wasn't planning to tell you this yet. Then her hand drifted gently toward her stomach. But the elders have already started discussing heirs. My stomach dropped. Heirs. The implication hit me instantly. They weren't just together. They were planning a future. A family. A legacy. Everything Kyle and I had once dreamed about. Everything that now belonged to someone else. Before I could respond, hurried footsteps approached. Kyle appeared. The second he saw Sienna standing outside my cabin, his expression darkened. What are you doing here? He crossed the distance immediately and pulled her protectively to his side. I told you to rest. Sienna smiled softly. I was worried about Ella. Kyle barely glanced at me. She's fine. His attention returned to Sienna instantly. Come on. You shouldn't be walking around so much. The tenderness in his voice hit harder than any insult. Because once upon a time, that had been my voice. My place. My Kyle. Now I was just a spectator. As they turned to leave, I caught the tail end of their conversation. The elders finalized the alliance discussions. If the ascension ceremony goes smoothly, the Blackrock marriage arrangement will be confirmed. Their footsteps faded. I remained frozen in the doorway. Political marriage. Blackrock pack. The words echoed through my head. Then I reached up and touched the mark on my face again. Cold. Familiar. Temporary. For the first time in years, I felt strangely calm. Maybe because I finally understood something. I was no longer waiting for Kyle to choose me. I was no longer hoping he'd remember his promises. And if Blackrock Pack wanted a political bride, then I'd give them one. I turned away from the cabin and headed straight for the council hall. I was going to accept the alliance marriage. The agreement. The council chamber fell silent the moment I spoke. I'll accept the Blackrock alliance marriage. Several elders stared at me in shock. Even the old alpha looked surprised. The gray-haired elder leaned forward. Do you understand what you're agreeing to? Once this alliance is finalized, there is no turning back. I know. My voice sounded strangely distant. If marrying me stabilizes the border and secures Kyle's succession, then I agree. A few elders exchanged pleased looks. Others looked almost smug. At least she's finally useful. I ignored them. The old alpha studied me for several seconds. What do you want in return? For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I clenched my fists. Don't tell Kyle. Not until I'm gone. The room went still. After a long silence, the elder nodded. Very well. The agreement will remain confidential. I bowed my head once, then left. Outside, the night air felt sharp against my skin. I walked through the forest path alone. Each step felt lighter, as if I were slowly disappearing from the life I'd spent years trying to save. Halfway back to the cabin, I stopped. Someone stood beneath the moonlight ahead. Kyle. For the first time since our bond ended, we were completely alone. His eyes met mine. Something unreadable flickered there. For one dangerous second, hope tried to rise inside me. Maybe I could finally tell him. Maybe he deserved the truth. Kyle. My throat tightened. 3 years ago in that forest, the person who saved your life was Ella. He cut me off, his attention already drifting elsewhere. I don't have time for this tonight. The words hit harder than I expected. He glanced toward the mountains. Sienna hasn't been sleeping well. I'm collecting moonflowers for her. The scent helps her relax. Moonflowers. I almost laughed. Years ago, when I'd gotten sick from a winter fever, Kyle had searched half the forest for healing herbs. He'd returned bleeding and exhausted, just to make sure I felt better. Now he crossed mountains for someone else, and couldn't spare a minute to hear me speak. Kyle turned to leave, then paused. Ella, stop making things difficult for Sienna. She's fragile. The words lingered long after he disappeared into the darkness. I stood there alone, and finally understood something. I didn't want to tell him anymore, because truth only mattered when someone cared enough to hear it. The one he chose. Over the following days, the harassment got worse. Wolves threw stones at my cabin, called me cursed to my face, said the pack would never heal until I left. The second Kyle's voice cut through the chaos, everyone outside went silent. Who gave you permission to touch her things? His tone was cold enough to freeze blood. The wolves who had been mocking me backed away immediately. One of them tried to argue. We were just trying to protect the pack from bad luck. Get out. Kyle didn't even let him finish. The command landed like a whip. Nobody dared challenge him. Within minutes, the crowd scattered. Kyle ordered guards to repair the broken door, gather my belongings, and clean the muddy mess left behind. I watched everything happen in silence. 3 years ago, this would have meant everything to me. Now, it felt like watching a stranger perform a familiar routine. From the shadows beyond the trees, Sienna observed the entire scene. Her expression remained pleasant, but her fingers dug into her palm. In her mind, I had already lost everything. The moon bond, the Luna title, my future. Soon, I would even be shipped off to another pack. So why, every single time, did Kyle still instinctively protect me? Why couldn't he simply let me disappear? That tiny spark of concern he still showed me terrified her. Kyle eventually turned and left without another word. The moment he disappeared, the forest grew quiet again. I crouched beside my belongings and continued packing. Soon none of this would matter. Not Moonshadow Pack. Not Kyle. Not the memories. Not the pain. I was leaving. And I never planned to come back. The attack. Hours later, after darkness had settled over the territory, footsteps approached again. I looked up. Kyle stood in the doorway. Moonlight outlined his broad shoulders. His gaze fell to the packed boxes, then to the folded clothes, then back to me. Something flickered across his face. A rare crack in his composure. Where are you going? The question sounded almost uneasy. I almost told him. Almost. Then suddenly, a deafening alarm horn exploded across the territory. Every wolf froze. Kyle's expression changed instantly. The border. We're under attack. Without another word, he took off running. And despite everything, I followed. Because Moonshadow Pack had been my home for most of my life. Because some habits were harder to break than others. By the time we reached the border, chaos had already erupted. Fire illuminated the night sky. Blood soaked the earth. Enemy wolves poured through the defenses from every direction. The attack had been carefully planned, timed perfectly to strike before Kyle's succession. Screams echoed through the battlefield. I barely managed to pull a young she-wolf out of danger before spotting Sienna on the far side of the fighting. She was trapped near the cliffs. Terrified. Alone. Then everything happened at once. Kyle, one of the elders shouted. Protect Sienna. She's carrying the future Luna bloodline. Nothing can happen to her. Across the battlefield, Kyle looked up. For one brief second, our eyes met. Then he made his choice. He ran to her. Not me. Her. The next moment, a massive enemy wolf slammed into my side. Pain exploded through my body. I was thrown backward and crashed into a cluster of rocks. Sharp stone tore through my shoulder and back. Warm blood flooded my clothes. For a moment, all I could hear was ringing. I stared at the night sky. And strangely, it didn't hurt as much as I expected. Because abandonment only destroys you the first 100 times. After that, you simply learn to survive it. The fading mark. The battle lasted until dawn. I remembered very little afterward. Only flashes. Pain. Blood. Voices. And eventually darkness. When I woke, I was back in the cabin. Bandages wrapped around my injuries. The room smelled faintly of herbs. I drifted in and out of consciousness until another presence entered the room. Kyle. He stood beside my bed. Silent. Watching. His clothes were still stained with blood. His expression unreadable. Then his eyes fixed on my face. And froze. I frowned. Confused. Until I saw it reflected in the nearby mirror. The mark. The cursed moon mark. It had faded. Only slightly. But enough to reveal glimpses of the woman hidden beneath it. Enough to expose the beauty the moon goddess had taken. Kyle stared. Completely motionless. For the first time in years, he looked shocked. His throat moved. And when he finally spoke, his voice sounded rough. What happened to your face? I looked away first. Maybe it's because of the injuries. The swelling changed how it looks. It was an obvious lie. Kyle knew it. I knew it. But neither of us said anything. He stood there for several seconds, studying me, searching for answers. Eventually he gave up. Get some rest. His tone returned to that familiar distance. And just like that, the moment was gone. The door closed behind him. I stared at it for a long time. Of course. He didn't ask any more questions. Not anymore. The accusation. The following days passed quietly. I rarely left the cabin. The wounds healed slowly. Sometimes fever left me drifting between dreams and reality. But even then, I couldn't escape the rumors. Kyle's been staying outside Sienna's room every night. She still gets scared after the attack. He barely sleeps. The elders are already preparing her Luna ceremony. She deserves it. Every story centered around her. The beloved future Luna. The pack's new treasure. Then came the stories about me. Ella deserved what happened. The moon goddess is punishing her. Honestly, she should have been exiled years ago. I listened to all of it without reacting. Soon enough, the alliance marriage would be finalized. And I'd leave. That thought brought me more peace than anything else. Until one evening, the cabin door exploded open. I jumped. Kyle stood in the doorway. His face was terrifyingly cold. Several elders and healers followed behind him. The atmosphere felt wrong immediately. Dangerous. Oppressive. My stomach tightened. Then Kyle spoke. What did you do to Sienna? For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. What? His eyes darkened. Sienna has developed a moon mark. The symptoms are identical to yours. High fever. Physical weakness. Dark markings appearing on the skin. An elder's gaze sharpened. Explain yourself. Suddenly everything made sense. The accusation. The anger. The gathering of witnesses. They had already decided I was guilty. I looked at Kyle. Really looked at him. At the man who once swore he'd stand beside me forever. The man now staring at me like I was a threat. A criminal. Something ugly tightened in my chest. They think I transferred the curse. Kyle's voice was dangerously quiet. They think you're jealous. They think you did something to her. Silence stretched between us. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it wasn't. It was devastating. I met his eyes. And asked the only question that mattered. So you believe them? The relic. Nobody answered immediately. The silence told me everything. One of the healers cleared his throat. We've examined every treatment option. Nothing works. The only thing capable of stabilizing the moon mark is an artifact blessed by the moon goddess. A chill ran through me. I already knew what was coming. Then the gray-haired elder spoke. The Luna relic. Hand it over. The words echoed through the room. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The Luna relic wasn't simply an heirloom. It was my mother's legacy. The last piece of her that remained. The one thing I'd protected through every humiliation and loss. Slowly, I turned toward Kyle. Waiting. Praying. Begging him silently to stop this. To say no. To remember. Instead, he lowered his eyes. And said, Ella, give them the relic. Everything inside me shattered. What? His jaw tightened. Sienna is sick. We just need to borrow it. Borrow. The word nearly made me laugh. Years ago, after my mother died, the elders had tried taking the relic, claiming I was too young to protect it. I had cried in front of the moon temple. And Kyle had stood beside me. Furious. Protective. Fearless. He told everyone that touching my relic meant declaring war on him. Now he stood here asking me to surrender it myself. You promised. My voice shook. You promised nobody would ever take this from me. Pain flashed briefly across his face, then disappeared. Please, Ella. Please. The word hurt worse than an order. Because it wasn't for me. It was for her. I stepped backward, clutching the relic against my chest. No. You've taken everything else. My title. My bond. My future. This is all I have left. You don't get this too. Kyle closed his eyes, then spoke without looking at me. Guards. My entire body went cold. No. Several wolves advanced. I backed away. No. Hands grabbed my arms. I fought. Desperately. Wildly. But I was still injured. Still weak. Still outnumbered. One by one, they pried my fingers open, until the relic slipped from my grasp. Kyle. I looked at him. Truly looked at him. Hoping for something. Anything. Remorse. Regret. Love. He never moved. Never stopped them. Never even met my eyes. The relic left my hands. And with it, the last piece of my heart. When Kyle turned and walked away carrying my mother's legacy to another woman, I finally understood. The man I loved was gone. And he wasn't coming back. The shattered relic. I sat motionless on the floor long after Kyle left. Blood still smeared my palms where the guards had torn the lunar relic from my hands. I wasn't sure how much time passed before the door opened again. When I looked up, Sienna stepped inside. She wore a flowing white dress. Perfect hair. Perfect makeup. Not a trace of illness anywhere. The picture of health. The picture of innocence. The picture of a liar. She stopped in front of me and smiled. You look devastated. I didn't answer. Sienna tilted her head. Then very casually, she dropped the act. The moon mark isn't real. The one on my face, I mean. My eyes narrowed. She laughed softly. Oh, come on, Ella. Did you really think I somehow inherited your curse? Her smile widened. A few herbs. A simple ritual. Some carefully timed symptoms. That's all it took. My stomach twisted. The healers believed it. The elders believed it. And Kyle. She laughed again. Kyle believed every word. Her voice dripped with satisfaction. I wanted to see how far he'd go for me. She glanced at the dried blood on my hands. Turns out, much further than I expected. I clenched my fists. Sienna wasn't finished. I wanted everything you had. Your title. Your place beside him. Your reputation. Your future. Your dignity. She slowly pulled something from behind her back. The Luna relic. My breath stopped. Moonlight reflected off the silver surface. My mother's relic. The last piece of her. The last piece of me. Sienna smiled. And this too. Give it back. The words escaped before I could stop them. She merely stepped away. Want it? Her eyes glittered with cruelty. Then catch. The relic slipped from her fingers. Time slowed. I lunged forward. Too late. Crack. The sound shattered the room. The relic hit the floor. And broke. One piece. Then two. Then 10. Silver fragments scattered across the wooden boards. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Something inside me snapped. Sienna. My hand moved before my brain did. The slap echoed through the cabin. Her head snapped sideways. The red mark appeared instantly. And then perfect timing. Footsteps thundered toward the door. The door burst open. Kyle rushed inside. His eyes landed on three things. The broken relic. Sienna holding her face. Me standing over her. The scene couldn't have looked worse. Sienna immediately burst into tears. Kyle. She threw herself into his arms. I just came to check on her. I was trying to help. She accused me of stealing her things and suddenly attacked me. The tears looked real. The fear looked real. The performance was flawless. Kyle's gaze dropped to the red mark on her cheek. Then lifted to me. The anger in his eyes was enough to make my chest hurt. Explain. I opened my mouth. Sienna had admitted everything. The fake moon mark. The lies. The relic. The manipulation. I should have told him. I should have screamed the truth. Instead, I looked at the way he held her. The way he shielded her. The way he stared at me. And I realized something. He wouldn't believe me. Not anymore. Not now. Maybe not ever. My silence seemed to confirm his worst suspicions. Kyle's expression hardened. Lock her up. Until the wedding and ascension ceremony are over. She doesn't leave confinement. The words landed like a death sentence. The guard stepped forward. I didn't resist. I simply stared at the shattered pieces of my mother's relic. The last light inside me finally went out. The prayer. The confinement room was small, cold, silent. Moonlight filtered through iron bars and painted silver lines across the stone floor. I sat beneath the window, one hand wrapped around a tiny fragment of the shattered relic I'd secretly hidden inside my sleeve. The sharp edge cut into my palm. I welcomed the pain. At least it reminded me I was still alive. Hours passed. Eventually, when the entire territory fell asleep, I began to sing. Softly, almost under my breath. An ancient moon prayer. The same prayer I had whispered 3 years ago while kneeling before the moon goddess. The prayer I had offered in exchange for Kyle's life. Outside the cell, footsteps suddenly stopped. Kyle. I sensed him before I heard him. The song faltered. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then his voice came through the door. Low. Uneasy. Almost confused. Where did you learn that prayer? My eyes closed. Of course he recognized it. 3 years ago, while hovering between life and death, he had heard fragments of it. I never got the chance to answer, because another voice interrupted. Kyle. Sienna. She approached slowly. What are you doing here? Kyle didn't move. She was singing. What kind of song? The prayer from that night. Silence. Then Sienna laughed lightly. Oh, that old thing. She stepped closer. My grandmother used to teach me that hymn. It's just a healing prayer. Her voice remained perfectly calm. Maybe Ella heard it from me. Then she added quietly. Interesting timing though. A subtle accusation. A suggestion. A seed. Kyle's jaw tightened. He turned back toward my door. Stop playing games, Ella. The disappointment in his voice hurt more than anger ever could. Footsteps retreated. The hallway fell silent again. I leaned my head against the wall and laughed bitterly. The truth had become a lie. And the lie had become truth. That was the world Sienna had built. The poisoning. The next day, Moonshadow Pack exploded into celebration. Preparations were underway for 2 events. Kyle and Sienna's wedding. And my departure to Blackrock Pack. When the guards released me from confinement, they handed me a gold dress. A final gesture of respect. Or perhaps a final costume before my exile. The banquet hall glittered with lights, music, laughter, champagne. Everyone celebrated. Everyone except me. Across the room, Kyle adjusted Sienna's cloak around her shoulders. The gesture was intimate, protective, familiar. Once upon a time he had promised me the same thing. One day he told me, the entire pack would witness me become Luna. I had believed him. The memory almost made me smile. Then chaos erupted. A glass shattered. An elder collapsed. Another guest hit the floor seconds later. Then another. And another. Screams echoed through the hall. The celebration dissolved instantly. Sienna rushed forward. She examined one victim. Then another. Her face turned pale. It's poison. The room froze. The old alpha roared for an investigation. Within minutes, guards returned. Their expressions were grim. We found traces of suspicious herbs near the kitchen. The scent matches herbs frequently used by Ella. Silence. Every head turned toward me. Then another guard arrived. He held up a torn piece of gold fabric. A piece matching tonight's dresses. Only 2 women wore gold. Me. And Sienna. The room exploded with accusations. I stepped forward. No. I've been confined this entire time. I never went near the kitchen. Across the room, Sienna clung to Kyle's arm. Tears filled her eyes. I stayed with Kyle all evening. I couldn't have done it. The old alpha slowly turned. and looked at Kyle. You saw someone near the kitchen earlier. Tell us. Who was it? The judgment. The hall went silent. Everyone waited for Kyle's answer, including me. He looked frozen, as if weighing something, as if fighting something. Earlier that evening, he had seen a woman leaving the rear corridor near the kitchen. A woman in gold. For one brief second, he'd wondered if it could have been Sienna. Just 1 second. Then he dismissed it. Because tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow was the ascension ceremony. Tomorrow was everything. And Sienna had too much to lose. Slowly, Kyle lifted his eyes. And spoke. It was Ella. 3 words. That's all it took. The hall erupted. The elders immediately seized control. The verdict came almost instantly. Attempted poisoning. Disruption of the alpha succession. Threatening the stability of the pack. Punishment. Public whipping. I didn't argue. Didn't beg. Didn't defend myself. Maybe because I was too tired. Maybe because somewhere deep down, I knew the trial had been decided long before it began. The whipping. They chained me to the punishment post at sunrise. The entire pack came to watch. The first whip struck. Pain exploded across my back. And suddenly I remembered Kyle's voice. You're my moonlight. The second whip landed. I remembered kneeling before the moon goddess. Take everything. Just save him. The third whip came. And I remembered the first time Kyle stood in front of me and told the world that anyone who hurt me would answer to him. The irony almost made me laugh. Whip after whip tore into my skin. Blood soaked my dress. The crowd watched. No one intervened. Not even him. Especially not him. By the end, I could barely stand. The chains were removed. I collapsed. And the guards dumped me back into the cabin like discarded trash. No healer came. No medicine arrived. No one cared. I lay alone on the bed and waited. One more day. Just one more day. Then I'd leave forever. The blessing returns. The next morning, Moonshadow Pack celebrated. Music filled the air. Flags flew above the territory. Kyle's ascension ceremony. Kyle and Sienna's wedding. The beginning of their future. Meanwhile, I quietly walked toward the border. Alone. Unwanted. Forgotten. Then it happened. A pulse of pure silver energy erupted from inside me. The entire world seemed to stop. Gasps echoed across the territory. The dark moon mark on my face began to fade. Slowly. Beautifully. Irreversibly. Like winter melting beneath spring sunlight. The curse disappeared. And underneath, I emerged. The face I'd lost 3 years ago. The blessing I'd sacrificed. The beauty the moon goddess had taken. It all returned. A sacred silver glow surrounded me. The crowd stared in stunned silence. Someone whispered, Moon goddess blessing. Another voice trembled. The mark wasn't a curse. Ella, she's chosen. On the ceremony platform, Kyle stood frozen. The world around him seemed to disappear. The cheers. The music. The wedding decorations. Everything faded. All he could see was me. Questions he'd buried for years suddenly crashed into him all at once. The prayer outside the confinement cell. The way my moon mark had begun fading after the border battle. The pain in my eyes every time Sienna was praised as his savior. The countless times I'd looked like I wanted to tell him something. And most of all, the voice. That voice from 3 years ago. The one he'd heard while dying. A gentle voice whispering a prayer beneath moonlight. His heartbeat became erratic. Aya. Before he realized it, he'd already stepped off the platform. My name echoed across the territory. I paused, slowly turning my head. Our eyes met. For one endless second, neither of us spoke. Kyle felt his chest tighten. The woman standing before him looked exactly like the girl he'd fallen in love with years ago. Beautiful. Radiant. Untouchable. But something was missing. The warmth. The love. The unwavering devotion she'd always shown him. There was nothing left now. Only calm indifference. And somehow, that hurt far more than hatred ever could. He took another step forward. Aya. His voice sounded strange. Uncertain. Almost desperate. But before he could say anything else, thunderous hoofbeats echoed through the forest. Everyone turned. A procession emerged from the trees. Black horses. silver armor, dark banners. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Even the elders went pale, because everyone recognized those colors. Blackrock Pack, the northern powerhouse. The riders stopped at the territorial boundary. Then one man dismounted. The moment his boots touched the ground, silence fell. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dangerously handsome, a predator among predators. His dark coat fluttered in the wind as he walked directly toward me. Without hesitation, without asking permission, without acknowledging anyone else, his gaze landed on my injuries. The fading blood beneath my dress, the whip marks, the exhaustion. Something cold flashed across his face. Then he removed his cloak and draped it over my shoulders. The gesture was simple, protective, possessive, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Kyle's jaw tightened instantly. Every instinct inside him screamed. The stranger finally looked up. His voice carried effortlessly across the crowd. "I'm here for my future wife." The world stopped. Complete silence. No one breathed. No one moved. Kyle felt as if he'd been punched directly in the chest. Future wife. What the hell did that mean? His eyes snapped toward the elders, then toward me, then back to the stranger. But before he could speak, the man extended his hand toward me. His expression softened slightly. "Come. It's time." I stared at the offered hand, then slowly placed mine in his. The moment our fingers touched, something inside Kyle broke. Because I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back. I didn't ask questions. I simply chose him, the same way I'd once chosen Kyle. And for the first time in years, I walked away from him. Too late. Aya. Kyle's voice exploded across the territory. He surged forward, only to be stopped by several elders. "Kyle, what are you doing?" "Move." The command came out like a growl. The elder's face darkened. "You've lost your mind. Today is your ascension ceremony. Today is your wedding. Move." Kyle repeated the word. More dangerous this time. The elder refused. Blackrock Pack accepted the alliance. The border is secure. The agreement worked. Everything we've built depends on today. Kyle's eyes burned with rage. "I never approved this alliance." The elder's expression hardened. "Ella did." Those two words hit him harder than any punch. Ella did. Not the elders. Not politics. Not pressure. Me. She chose this. Kyle's breathing became uneven. "When?" The elder hesitated, then answered. "The day after the moon bond ended." Kyle went still. The day after. While he was comforting Sienna. While he was preparing a wedding. While he was slowly erasing Ella from his life. She had been arranging her departure. Forever. Something ugly twisted in his chest. A feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Real fear. Not for a battle. Not for leadership. For loss. Permanent loss. Ahead of him, I continued walking, never once turning around. Each step felt like a blade sliding deeper into his heart. Then another obstacle appeared. "Kyle." "Sienna." Tears filled her eyes. She grabbed his arm. "You can't leave. Today's our wedding. The whole pack is watching. Please." His expression remained unreadable. Sienna's panic grew. So she reached for the weapon that always worked. The life debt. "I saved your life. You promised. You promised you'd marry me." The words landed like chains. The same chains that had controlled him for 3 years. The reason he'd searched for her. Protected her. Chosen her. Believed her. Around them, the elders quickly joined in. "You can't abandon the ceremony. The entire pack depends on you. Think about your responsibility." Voices surrounded him. Pressured him. Restrained him. Manipulated him. But Kyle barely heard any of it. Because in the distance, I was already mounting a horse beside another alpha. Another man's hand settled protectively against my waist. Another man looked at me the way Kyle once had. The sight made something vicious awaken inside him. For the first time, he understood exactly what he was losing. And there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. I rode away, Blackrock Pack surrounding me like a protective wall. The forest swallowed us whole. And Kyle remained standing there, watching, Powerless. Helpless. Too late. Far too late. As the wedding music reluctantly resumed behind him, only one thought echoed through his mind. Ella left. And she never looked back. The truth comes out. The wedding celebration lasted long into the night. But inside the Alpha house, the atmosphere was entirely different. Sienna stood before a mirror. Her fingers brushed the mating mark on her neck. She should have felt victorious. Instead, unease gnawed at her stomach. Ever since my moon mark disappeared. Ever since my beauty returned. Ever since Blackrock Pack came to claim me. Nothing felt secure anymore. The bedroom door opened. Kyle entered. Still dressed in ceremonial black. Still wearing the Alpha insignia. Still devastatingly handsome. Yet somehow colder than she'd ever seen him. Kyle. Sienna smiled softly and stepped forward. You must be exhausted. She reached for his collar. Kyle moved away. Not dramatically. Just enough. But enough. The smile froze on her lips. Why were you crying today? The question caught her off guard. What? At the ceremony. Why were you crying? Relief almost made her laugh. That was the question? Easy. I was scared. I thought everything was falling apart. I was worried about you. I was worried about us. But Kyle didn't react. He simply continued staring at her. I wasn't asking about that. When I left the platform. How did you know I wanted to go after Ella? Silence. For the first time all day, Sienna couldn't immediately answer. A tiny pause. Less than a second. But Kyle noticed. She forced a smile. I could tell. You looked upset. Another lie. Another performance. Another excuse. And for the first time, Kyle didn't believe it. He turned away. Kyle. Where are you going? He stopped at the doorway, then spoke without looking back. To verify something. The door closed, leaving Sienna alone. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror. For the first time, she looked afraid. Because Kyle had started asking questions. And questions were dangerous. Questions led to answers. And answers could destroy everything. The wrong woman. Kyle rode straight to the old healer's residence. The elderly wolf looked shocked when he arrived. Alpha. When I was poisoned. Tell me everything. The old healer immediately grew nervous. A bad sign. Kyle noticed. You remember something. The old wolf swallowed. I remember enough. Then talk. The healer hesitated. Finally he sighed. You should have died. The poison reached your heart. There was no treatment. No cure. No hope. Kyle's jaw tightened. I know that. What changed? The healer looked away. That's the strange part. Everything changed overnight. It was as if someone paid a price. Kyle froze. What price? The healer hesitated again. Then answered carefully. I don't know. But after that night, your condition improved. And Ella's started getting worse. The room went silent. Kyle's pulse thundered. What do you mean? The healer rubbed trembling hands together. Ella became sick. Weak. Feverish. She spent weeks barely able to stand. And shortly afterward, the moon mark appeared. Kyle felt something cold slide down his spine. The timing. The symptoms. The sacrifice. The prayer. Everything suddenly began connecting. He left immediately. And headed for the archives. By sunrise, ancient records covered an entire table. Medical reports. Council documents. Temple visitation logs. Everything from 3 years ago. The deeper he dug, the worse it became. Ella had visited the Moon Temple repeatedly after his recovery. Sometimes every few days. Sometimes barely able to walk. The reports described exhaustion. Blood loss. High fever. Sudden deterioration. All beginning immediately after he survived. Kyle stared at the records. His chest tightening with every page. Then he found another lead. A servant. One who had once worked closely with Sienna. The young woman was dragged before him before noon. Terrified. Shaking. The moment she saw Kyle's face, she started crying. Who started the rumor? Kyle's voice was ice. The one claiming Sienna saved my life. The servant went pale. Immediately. And Kyle knew. She knew. It was her, wasn't it? The servant collapsed to her knees. I didn't mean to. Answer. It was Sienna. The confession burst out. She told us to spread the story. She said it would help stabilize the pack. She said people needed a hero. Tears streamed down the servant's face. We didn't know it was a lie. Kyle's breathing stopped. For a long moment, he couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't think. Then he asked the question he was terrified to hear answered. Was she even there? The servant shook her head. No. The world tilted. No. She wasn't there. She never saved him. She never even witnessed it. The room spun. Memories flooded back. Every time Ella tried to tell him something. Every look of pain. Every unfinished sentence. Every moment he'd chosen Sienna instead. A horrible realization crashed over him. He had spent 3 years loving the wrong woman, protecting the wrong woman, trusting the wrong woman, and destroying the right one. The Alpha's claws extended involuntarily, wood splintered beneath his grip. The servant screamed. Kyle barely heard her, because another truth had just become impossible to ignore. If Sienna wasn't his savior, then there was only one person left. Aya. And he had driven her away. With his own hands. The temple records. Kyle rode straight to the Moon Temple. The journey should have taken 20 minutes. He made it in 10. The entire ride, one thought repeated endlessly inside his head. Please let me be wrong. Please. For once. Let me be wrong. The ancient temple stood deep within the mountains. The old temple keeper was waiting for him. As if she already knew why he'd come. You finally arrived. Kyle stopped. You knew I'd come? The old woman didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked deeper into the temple. Follow me. The temple archives were hidden beneath the sanctuary. Ancient records lined the walls. Hundreds of years of prayers, sacrifices, contracts, promises made to the moon goddess. The old woman stopped before a locked chest, then handed Kyle a thin weathered journal. The answer you're looking for is inside. Kyle's hands trembled. For the first time in years, the Alpha of Moonshadow Pack was shaking. Slowly he opened the journal and found the entry dated 3 years ago, the night he should have died. The words stared back at him. Cold, unforgiving, brutal. To preserve the life of one standing at death's door, the petitioner offers her beauty, her divine blessing, her future Luna fate, her bloodline's moonlight. Kyle stopped breathing. The page blurred. His vision shook. No name was written. There didn't need to be. The date was enough. The timing was enough. The truth was enough. What happened to her? His voice cracked. The old woman looked at him with ancient eyes. She knelt outside this temple until sunrise. Kyle closed his eyes. The image appeared instantly. Aya. Young. Terrified. Alone. Begging the moon goddess to save him. While he knew nothing. While he slept. While she sacrificed everything. The old woman continued. The goddess spared her life. But the payment had to be taken. Her beauty faded. Her blessing disappeared. And the first moon mark appeared before she even left the mountain. Kyle staggered backward. His legs almost gave out. Suddenly every memory became unbearable. Ella clutching her face after the mark appeared. Ella smiling through humiliation. Ella enduring years of whispers. Ella begging him not to take the Luna relic. Ella standing chained to the punishment pillar. Bleeding. Broken. Alone. And him. Always him. Standing on the wrong side. Kyle lowered his head. For the first time since becoming Alpha, he couldn't breathe. The pain was physical. Like claws tearing through his chest. He remembered every promise he'd ever made. I'll protect you. No one will hurt you. I'll always be here. What a joke. He wasn't her protector. He was the reason she suffered. The reason she cried. The reason she left. And now she was gone. Because of him. The confrontation with Sienna. Kyle stormed back into the Alpha house. The guards stepped aside when they saw his face. He threw open the door to Sienna's chambers. She looked up from her mirror. Her expression shifted from surprise to unease to practiced calm in the span of a heartbeat. Kyle? What's wrong? He didn't answer. He simply walked toward her. step by step, until she was backed against the wall. You want to explain something to me? His voice was terrifyingly soft. Sienna swallowed. Explain what? The Moon Temple records. The healer's testimony. The servant who confessed everything. Take your pick. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted. No sound came out. You. Kyle's voice cracked. You destroyed her. You destroyed us. Sienna's hands trembled. For a moment, real fear flickered in her eyes. Then she did what she always did. She reached for a story she could survive. Kyle, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I loved you. I wanted to be with you. And everyone already wanted to believe it. The elders needed a future Luna. Moonshadow Pack needed someone beautiful and pure. And everyone had already decided Ella was unlucky. Her lips curled into something desperate. I just did what everyone wanted me to do. Kyle stared at her. The woman he'd spent 3 years protecting. The woman he'd chosen over Ella. The woman who had destroyed everything. And her moon mark? Everything she suffered afterward. A flicker of mockery crossed Sienna's eyes. That was her own fault for being stupid. She had chances to tell you, didn't she? But she didn't. She chose to stay silent. That was the final spark. The last thread of Kyle's restraint snapped. Slap. The sound cracked through the room. Sienna's head jerked to the side. Blood darkened the corner of her mouth. For the first time, real fear appeared in her eyes. Kyle stood in front of her, chest rising and falling hard. His gaze so cold it was almost inhuman. You don't get to say her name. Sienna stumbled back. Kyle, you can't treat me like this. I'm your wife. Wife? Kyle let out a short, humorless laugh. You think you're worthy of that title? He raised a hand and summoned the guards. Lock her up. No one releases her without my order. Sienna's face drained of color. No. Kyle. You can't do this to me. The elders were part of it too. They pushed me forward. They wanted this. If they hadn't. Kyle turned away. He didn't look at her again. In his mind, only Ella remained. Ella tied to the whipping post. Ella clutching the Luna relic and begging him not to take it. Ella walking away from Moonshadow Pack without looking back. Every memory burned through him like fire. Then a guard rushed up behind him and dropped to one knee. Alpha. We just received news from Blackrock Pack. Lady Ella is about to complete the official alliance ceremony under the witness of the Moon Goddess. Once the ritual is complete, she will formally belong to Blackrock Pack. Kyle stopped breathing. Official alliance ceremony. Those words drove into his chest like a blade. Once the ceremony was done, Ella's connection to Moonshadow Pack, to him, would truly be severed. His breathing turned uneven. The next second, he turned sharply and strode toward the exit. Prepare my horse. We're going to Blackrock. For the first time, he no longer cared about his position. The elders. The ceremony. His reputation. None of it mattered. All he knew was this. This time, he had to bring her back. Blackrock. By the time Kyle reached Blackrock territory, the wedding had already begun. He was held back by 2 lines of guards. He hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot. Dust from the road still covered his clothes. From where he stood, he could see the moon lanterns glowing above the altar. The decorations. The guests. The celebration. The wedding was real. Every bit of it. Ella wasn't waiting for him. She wasn't testing him. She wasn't hoping he'd come apologize. She was truly moving on. Move. His voice sounded raw. The guards didn't budge. Today is a Blackrock wedding. No outsiders are permitted beyond this point. Kyle looked toward the distant altar. The faint sound of ceremonial music drifted through the air. Something inside him finally snapped. Without warning, he moved. The nearest guard was thrown aside. Another stumbled backward. Kyle. Stop him. Chaos erupted instantly. But Kyle no longer cared. He surged through the fortress like a man possessed. Up the stairs. Through the corridors. Toward the altar. Toward the woman he couldn't lose. The ceremony had already begun. Guests lined both sides of the hall. Moonlight poured through stained glass windows. The high priestess stood before the altar, unrolling the sacred vows. I stood beneath the moon goddess symbol. Lucian beside me. Not touching me. Not claiming me. Simply standing there. Making it clear to everyone present that no one would ever humiliate me again. The high priestess raised her hand. She was about to begin the vows. Boom! The doors burst open. The sound echoed through the entire hall. Every guest turned. Every voice fell silent. Kyle stood in the doorway, chest heaving, hair disheveled, eyes burning red. I slowly turned around. The moment our eyes met, something inside him seemed to shatter. He stared at me in my wedding dress. At the altar. At Lucian standing beside me. Then his voice ripped through the hall. Ella, come with me. The final goodbye. Kyle's voice crashed through the wedding hall, rough and strained. Silence swallowed the room. The moon lanterns continued to burn quietly. Every guest had turned toward the doorway. Toward the man covered in dust and desperation. His eyes were fixed entirely on me. But I didn't move. I didn't answer. I simply looked at him. Lucian stepped forward half a pace. Not enough to seem aggressive. Just enough to place himself between Kyle and me. Kyle's jaw tightened instantly. The sight clearly hurt him. Ella. His voice cracked. I know everything now. Nobody spoke. I know who saved me. I know it wasn't Sienna. A ripple of murmurs spread through the hall. Kyle ignored them. It was you. 3 years ago. At the Moon Temple. The sacrifice. The blessing. The moon mark. I know all of it now. His eyes were red. Not from anger. From grief. From regret. From sleepless nights spent drowning in the truth. I investigated everything. The temple records. The old reports. The herb Sienna used. I know what happened. His voice dropped lower. Ella. I know I was wrong. The room fell silent again. Every eye shifted toward me. Waiting. Watching. Expecting something. Forgiveness. Closure. A miracle. Instead, I only asked one question. So, Kyle froze. The word hit him harder than shouting ever could. His lips parted. Nothing came out. I stepped down from the altar. My wedding gown trailed behind me like flowing moonlight. For the first time in years, I stood directly before him. Not as his rejected mate. Not as a future Luna. Not as a woman begging to be believed. Just myself. Kyle. You say you know now. He swallowed hard. Ido. Then tell me, when did you finally decide to listen? His face lost color. I continued. I tried to tell you on the forest path. You said you didn't have time because you were gathering moonflowers for Sienna. A muscle twitched in his jaw. I sang the moon prayer in the confinement room. You almost remembered. But she lied. And you believed her. Again. Kyle lowered his eyes. I know. I didn't stop. When they took my relic. When they dragged me to the whipping post. When they accused me of poisoning people. You were there. Every time. I gave you a chance. My voice softened. And every time you chose her. Kyle looked up again. His eyes were shining now. Desperate. Broken. Ella, please. No. I slowly shook my head. It's too late. The truth settled over the hall. Heavy. Final. Irreversible. Kyle took a shaky step forward. As though trying to reach me. Trying to hold on to something already gone. But Lucian stepped between us. His expression remained calm. Controlled. Certain. She answered you. Stop. Kyle's eyes flashed. This is between me and Ella. Lucian's gaze cooled further. No. The moment you let her suffer alone. The moment you chose someone else. The moment you watched her walk away. It stopped being your decision. Kyle went silent. Completely silent. Because there was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to defend. Nothing left to save. I turned away. And walked back toward the altar. The high priestess waited patiently. The guests remained still. The moonlight continued shining across the ceremony hall. Lucian looked at me. No pressure. No demands. No expectations. Only one simple question. Do you wish to continue? I looked up toward the moon goddess symbol above the altar. For years, I'd spent my life looking backward. At promises. At sacrifices. At pain. At Kyle. Now for the first time, I looked forward. And I smiled. Yes. Let's continue. The words shattered whatever hope Kyle still had left. He stood alone in the center of the hall, watching, powerless, as the wedding ceremony resumed without him. And in that moment, Kyle finally understood. I wasn't choosing Lucian because I wanted revenge. I wasn't marrying him to make Kyle suffer. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I had simply stopped waiting. And that was something he could never undo. The moon goddess's blessing. By the time the ceremony ended, the first pale light of dawn had begun creeping across the horizon. Yet the silver glow above the moon goddess altar had not faded. If anything, it had grown brighter. Pure. Radiant. Sacred. Every wolf gathered in the hall witnessed it clearly. The moment I placed my hand in Lucian's and completed our vows, a gentle shower of silver moonlight drifted down from above, like feathers woven from light, like a blessing carried by the wind itself. The soft glow settled around us, wrapping us both in a halo of pale silver. The entire hall fell silent. Even the high priestess looked stunned. Then she slowly lowered her head. The moon goddess has witnessed this union. A murmur spread through the crowd. Not because they doubted the blessing, but because such a sign was rare. Very rare. It was an unmistakable acknowledgement. Approval. Acceptance. The moon goddess herself had recognized our bond. At the far end of the hall, Kyle stood motionless. His face was pale. His eyes hollow. For years, he'd believed certain things would always remain where he left them. My love. My loyalty. The Luna title. The moon goddess's favor. He'd assumed that whenever he was ready, he could simply reach back and reclaim them. Now he finally understood how wrong he'd been. Some losses were permanent. Some doors only closed once. And once they did, they never reopened. After the ceremony, Blackrock guards approached Kyle and quietly informed him it was time to leave. Lucian didn't humiliate him, didn't taunt him, didn't even look at him again. That complete indifference somehow hurt far more than any insult. Eventually, Kyle allowed himself to be escorted from the fortress. When he'd arrived, he'd come with desperation, with hope, with the belief that if he just explained everything, I would return. Now he left with nothing. Home. By the time spring finally arrived in Blackrock Pack, the last traces of winter snow had begun to melt beneath the mountains. The brightest full moon of the year rose over the northern sky. I stood among the moonwood trees behind the fortress, my fingertips brushing the silver-white leaves that had only recently emerged from their branches. Without realizing it, I smiled. I had been here for 3 months. The whip scars on my back had healed completely. The moon goddess blessing that had returned to me had grown stronger and steadier with each passing day. In Blackrock Pack, those gifts weren't feared. They weren't mocked. They were respected. Lucian never trapped me inside the role of wife. He asked for my opinion during council meetings, listened when I spoke about border defenses, allowed me to oversee parts of the healing houses and moon temple affairs. He didn't just give me safety. He gave me partnership. That evening, when I returned from the moonwood, Lucian was already waiting in the dining hall. The fireplace crackled warmly. Freshly roasted white fruit sat on the table beside my favorite calming tea. When he saw me enter, he set aside the map he had been studying. Went to the forest again. I slipped out of my cloak and sat beside him. I did. The harvest will come early this year. A small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then maybe it's going to be a good year. I accepted the cup of tea he handed me. My fingers brushed the warm silver. A familiar feeling settled inside my chest. Peace. Real peace. I never had to wonder whether Lucian would choose someone else. Never had to question whether he believed me. Never had to fight for a place beside him. He wasn't loud. He wasn't dramatic. But he was steady. And after everything I'd survived, I realized steadiness was far more valuable than promises. Lucian. I lowered my cup. Do you regret it? Marrying me. The fire crackled softly. Lucian set down his own cup, then reached over and brushed away a small patch of melted snow from my shoulder. His voice was calm. Certain. Not once. Not the day you agreed. Not now. And not in the future. The answer was simple, but it carried more weight than any grand declaration ever could. For a moment, I just looked at him. Years ago, I had given my entire heart to someone else. Back then, I'd thought that was forever. Now I understood something different. Love wasn't built on dramatic sacrifices or desperate promises. It was built on respect, trust, choice, and the quiet decision to keep showing up every day. Slowly, I placed my hand over his. Lucian paused, then turned his hand and intertwined our fingers. Warm, steady, certain. I laughed softly. The sound surprised even me, because it felt light, free, like someone who had finally stepped out of a very long winter. Epilogue. Far away, Moonshadow Pack was no longer the territory it once had been. Sienna remained imprisoned for fraud, conspiracy, and the damage she had caused to the pack. The wolves who once admired her now spoke her name only with disgust. Several elders lost their authority after the truth came out. The pack survived, but it never fully recovered. Neither did its reputation. Kyle remained alpha, yet his rule was no longer effortless. The sacred flame within the Moon Temple never burned as brightly as it once had. More and more wolves quietly wondered if the Moon Goddess's favor had left with me. Some nights, Kyle visited the old confinement room where I'd been locked away. Other nights, he stood outside the abandoned cabin where I'd once lived. Alone, silent, watching the darkness, as if waiting for something that would never return. Late that spring, the moon would burst into bloom. White flowers covered every branch. Moonlight filtered through the petals, turning the entire forest silver. Lucian and I walked side by side beneath the trees. The wind carried the scent of blossoms. Soft, sweet, peaceful. I looked up as petals drifted from above. For the first time, I realized something. Everything I had lost had found its way back to me.